use the Gay Marriage Act as an issue setting up and leading into the 2010 elections. Was there thought to, like, sort of, the discussion was whether or not to stick to moral issues there or just to practical issues? Anybody wants to talk about that?
Well, I think the issue of marriage is going to be one of the fundamental issues that will decide the 2010 elections. For example, we had a vote in the Iowa House that Republicans had to force to make sure we get our legislators on record. We have about a dozen legislative Democrats that campaigned on the issue of actually protecting marriage. But when it came to having to actually cast a vote, they didn't. They voted with their legislative leadership to stand in the way of putting the issue before the citizens of this state. So Republicans are going to go on record and they're going to do it early next year when we get into session, because Iowans need to know that there's one party that's on the side of giving Iowans the right to decide for ourselves how we want to define marriage, and not just allow a handful of unelected judges to do that.
Well, I would add one other thing that yes, we're mentioning that we want to give Iowans the right to vote on this issue, but we are not elevating this issue in an attempt to score political points. We're elevating this issue in response to this being forced upon the people of Iowa. This is not us trying to use a wedge issue. This is us acting solely in response to an activist court that is attempting to redefine a definition of marriage which has stood since the dawn of civilization. So we are merely being responsive and standing up for Iowans in light of what has happened.
Let me just finish by saying this is how Republicans get the trust of the voters back in the state. We've gone out there since August actually telling the citizens of Iowa what Republicans will do if you give us the trust and make us the majority party in the state. And whether it's talking about our public education reforms, whether it's state-based market healthcare reforms, whether it's budget reforms, whether it's the transparency initiatives we talked about a week or so ago, and coming up our sixth and final solution meeting in session, we'll go about in the economy. So we think it's important as Republicans, not just to say those things we think are going wrong with check over in the liberal majority in Des Moines, but make sure Iowans understand what our solutions are for facing any challenges that this state or the families have.
How closely are you watching the special elections today in Cedar Rapids, and whether you win or whether you lose, what sort of significance is that?
Well, and that's one that's fought there locally in Cedar Rapids. It's an incredibly challenging legislative seat for any Republican. The Democrats have an overwhelming registration advantage. I know it's been a grassroots campaign, and our Lynn County volunteers have been working hard on it.
Strategy-wise, you said early on in the session Republicans want to be on record as supporting an opportunity to vote. I think you're already on record from last session. What do you plan to do to try to force that issue? Because if you don't get it done this session, you're moving yourself back 2 years on a timetable to get that on your ballot.
Yeah, I'll defer to the newest assistant leader in the House, Representative Winchell.
Strategy-wise, the legislative process, when you file a bill, it has to go through committee, be brought out of committee, and then voted on the floor. What we did last year with the help of Representative Christopher Raines was we attached an amendment to a budget bill that basically forced the vote. Just to be completely frank with you, when I went to the Democrat members that I knew wanted to vote on this issue, allowing Iowans to vote, they hid behind procedural votes. They said, you're attaching amendments to certain pieces of legislation that are not germane. Your amendment is not germane to this issue, so therefore we're not going to vote with you to allow this vote. Strategy-wise, what we're going to do, we're going to make sure that every opportunity we get to either bring a bill out of committee or bring the amendment out of committee or to attach the amendment where it would fit is done. That way that those legislators who, again, campaigned on the issue, feel strongly about the issue, want to vote in favor of this constitutional amendment, have the opportunity to do so without hiding behind the legislative leadership.
Can you list those Democrats, or name a couple of names there that promise to do it? You say, or
I would, but the fact is, some of these people are my friends and would not like to be outed in the papers. So it's between me and them as friends. If they want to come out openly and say, yes, I want to support the issue, that's their decision. It's not for me to come out and say. There are people that are already on record as campaigning for it, and Chairman Strong might have some of those.
I'll give you one very prominent example. We had a special election down in Fairfield just a few months ago, and Kurt Hansen, the Democrat down there, actually said that you would vote to give Iowans the right to decide for themselves on marriage. He ran a campaign that was indistinguishable from the Republican candidate. Now we're going to see if his rhetoric on the campaign trail actually matches his record now that he's an elected representative.
So you're saying the difference this go around is instead of down the road in the process trying to do it amendment-wise, you're going to start from the get-go introducing a bill or a resolution which probably doesn't have much of a chance passing committee, but you're going to run that way and then work it from that point on?
This last session, we already had the amendment in play. It was filed, it was in committee. We tried to bring that amendment out of committee, or bring that bill out of committee to the floor. That was allowed by the majority party, again, under the tactics they used, saying that it was not a procedural vote, or that it was a procedural vote and that it was not an actual vote on the issue. We're going to continue to pursue every avenue that we can to bring this to a vote in the Iowa House by whatever means we can through the legislative procedures.
But what's changed? I mean, you did that last session to no avail.
Last session, when we were facing this dilemma, we had a lot of their members who, again, were hiding behind their legislative leadership. This issue now being in the forefront. When the Supreme Court ruled, it was already in April. At that point in time, we were already past certain funnels. That didn't allow us the opportunity to make a big deal about this issue, as it did when the Supreme Court ruled. Now that we're getting back into session, every one of us as legislators has gotten contact from the constituents, has felt the heat from their constituents, and those Democrats that want to support this issue have felt the heat more than anybody else right now. So we're hoping that when we get back into session, we can turn their hearts and have them stand up for their leadership, do what is right by Iowans, and bring this to a vote so the people of Iowa can get their opportunity to voice their opinion.
Any other